Hi and welcome to High Heels in the High Country. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. Over the past 12 weeks we run stories about women doing successful things in the rural scene. Next 2 weeks we're going to highlight just some of them. The first one we chose was Perry Drysdale. She's a lady who, like many others, have carved a road into the export business. The Untouched World and Merino mink garments are some of New Zealand's best-known clothing brands. They've been seen on the great and the good and worn around the globe. It's a far cry from 1981 when Perry Drysdale set up the Snowy Peak Company with just 10 outworkers knitting infants' garments and accessories.
Well, I came back to Christchurch and I thought, there's a few problems. I don't actually know how to knit. So I went to a neighbour and said, could you teach me how to knit? And she said, sure. And I asked a friend if she could give me the pattern of in fact, I asked that friend if she'd like to go into business with me and give me the pattern of a garment that she made for my little boy, who, wherever I went in his buggy, everyone would stop and talk about this gorgeous piece of knitwear. And anyway, she took 10 days, and after 10 days she hadn't got the pattern, so I thought, well, that's not going to work. So I now had this skill about knitting, so I made a pattern up and I made this little hooded sweater out of garter stitch, which means you've only learned how to do one sort of knitting. If you stay, then you progress to stocking stitch. And so I made this jacket and I made a little pair of mittens, a little pair of booties, and went to Trade and Industry and said I want to export these to America. And they said, that sounds really interesting, where do you sell them now? And I said, what do you mean, where do I sell them now? I want to export them to America. And so they said, well, it's a good idea to have a local market before you get underway. And so I asked why, and they politely told me why. And so I left there and walked across the square and got my first order. And then went home and thought, now I've got to make these things. So that's kind of how it started.
Within 4 years, there were 500 outworkers located from North Cape to Bluff. A shortage of outworkers forced the decision to bring the work in-house and purchasing of knitting machines. The first computerised knitting machines arrived without instruction manuals, creating another set of problems. Thankfully, those days are gone, with the company now using 6th generation knitting machines. These machines are so sophisticated they can knit entire garments, including socks, scarves and hats, even jerseys. But not everything's automated. There's still a complement of highly skilled workers finishing garments to the exacting standards required on every Snowy Peak garment. One of those finishing touches to the kite emblem. Your garments are distinctive everywhere you look. You see the kite as the zip pull.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
We had this little brand called Untouched World, and the Italians went off and thought about what sort of story we could build around Untouched World, and they came up with that whole kite story, which was absolutely brilliant. It was fantastic. Yeah.
And it's really become a very worldwide logo.
It has, and it's really interesting that it resonates worldwide, that little symbol, and everybody thinks of it as their own. And it was really interesting. I smiled one day when we were sending an order up of merino mink up to the Russians, and they came back and said, no, we wanted the eagle on the garments. So for them it was an eagle. There's a real club out there around Untouched World. People will be sitting on a plane and someone will come along and just pat the back of their neck, because often the embroidery, the logo's on the back of their neck, and you look up and you'll see someone else is wearing Untouched World. We hear about that a lot.
Depression is one of the largest issues facing rural communities, and it's not going away. In fact, it's growing. Farmer's daughter Pip O'Neill knows all about it. Her father lost his battle with depression just over a year ago.
Well, we saw Dad going through a whole lot. He had depression for 5 or 6 years before he passed away, and he would just go quiet and go into himself, and we knew when he was having a really tough time but we, never really talked about it because he didn't want anyone to know that he had depression.
The father of 3 ran a 5,500 hectare farm in Otago, always maintaining a staunch persona in front of the family.
Dad to me was on a pedestal and he was my idol, and I was so proud of him, but I never told, as he did, and I'm sure he knew I loved him and was very proud of him, but we never, the relationship was we'd always talk about rugby and farming and what the racehorses were doing and all those things, rather than me saying, Dad, how are you feeling?
With an outgoing personality, it was the perfectionist within him that began to take over.
His laugh was the laugh you could hear above the crowd, and he was a real fun-loving kind of guy, and I think he just couldn't handle, it was that feeling of the weakness and that feeling of being really down, and not, we tried getting him help, but he just didn't really want to accept it.
Pip opened up to Sir John about her father's battles, but those battles are something JK's all too familiar with himself. Since 2007, Sir John's been an advocate for depression after speaking out about his own fight with the illness.
I was in incredibly bad shape, so for me the reaching out was a real necessity, and once again I just wish I had done it earlier, because I wouldn't have had to go through what I went through, suffering alone, thinking that it was an illness that was unique to me. So I think, for me, the reaching out part was out of desperation.
He understands the pressure on farmers to fit the stereotypical, staunch, self-reliant male image. But when it comes to depression, he believes it's misunderstood.
I think depression for me, I thought it was a weakness rather than an illness. One of the things I keep saying now is actually an illness. But because you don't treat it and because you can't see it, you really internalise it.
Farming's no longer what it used to be. Gone are the days of running a small family patch of land. Now they're multi-million-dollar businesses. And for those in charge, they face escalating compliance costs and extreme weather combined with the normal stresses of life that just don't help.
An isolation factor, things like your relationships, the finances, the weather, all sorts of things compound it. And it's never usually just one thing, but a series of things that build you to that tipping point where you feel that you can't cope anymore.
18 months ago, Federated Farmers launched this When Life's a Bitch campaign. It's in line with the recent suicide rates. Believe it or not, they're worse in the rural areas than in the urban areas. 16 per 100,000 people take their own life in the rural areas, compared to just over 11 in the urban areas.
It's been one of our best kept secrets for a very, very long time, and it's taken us a really long time to get people out and about and talking about it, and even being able to actually just broach the subject. Been really hard work.
But farmers are no longer fighting alone. The issue is no longer a secret, and help is not far away, which means these guys, the farmers, the fathers, brothers and sons, aren't left to battle alone on the farm, and their wives, sisters and daughters won't be left without the ones they love.
Many farmers have been using their farms as a bit of an extra income off the side, but it's interesting that isolation is one of the things that's helping that, as we found out with Middle Rock Station in the Rakaia Gorge.
This group of mainland Chinese visitors are being taken on an extended tour of the farm, including sheepdog mustering. Daughter Charlotte explains how sheepdogs are used on the farm.
We don't like to use dogs too much because we don't want to stress the sheep too much. But I will show you how I use the dogs and how the sheep respond to them. But fingers crossed, huh? We'll see how it goes. You never know.
Once the party has disembarked from the coach, Charlotte takes the time to introduce the dogs to the visitors.
A heading dog. A heading dog is not supposed to bark. It's supposed to be supposed to. But they move the sheep by looking. A dog becomes ready for work and really good at work by about 3 years old or 4 years old maybe. Before that, too young.
Introductions over, Charlotte sets the dogs to work mustering the sheep. The dogs may understand the commands. The sheep, however, aren't always so sure. Despite Charlotte's commands and whistles, the visitors get to see firsthand how unpredictable sheep herding really can be. It is, however, an unrehearsed and realistic slice of high country life.
We do pride ourselves on, number one, we are a working farm, and I think that's why people enjoy coming to visit Middle Rock, is that they see a true farming family going about their daily life. Of course we have to make allowances to have them there, and we might rearrange some activities, but no, we try and keep it as authentic as possible, because it's easier that way.
The tour resumes with the next stop being a herd of sheep. Middle Rock Station farms over 7,000 sheep, producing fine wool for the apparel trade and export lamb for international meat markets. In this paddock are 600 sheep, all about to be captured on camera.
This is called a mob. A mob of sheep is a group of sheep. And these are the oldest mothers. So they are, there's just a few of the fathers left. See the black face ones in the front, and see them sniffing one of the white mothers? That is because she is still ready to mate. So the rest of them have probably been mated with, so they have lambs in their bellies.
The cameras record every sheep and every site.
My mother started this business off as garden tours. She had developed this garden over the years, and people wanted to come in and they wanted to buy plants, so that just evolved. And then increasingly I said, well, while we're here, could we go out on the farm? And then all of a sudden the bookings started coming. The garden's lovely, Lynn, but could we go on the farm? And so I think they really want to see how farming operates, where their food's coming from, and what our lives are like.
Charlotte provides a full commentary on all aspects of high country station life. It's information that visitors seem keen to hear, and despite the occasional language barrier, they continually ask questions about life in the remote and beautiful setting.
Waipara. Home to Canterbury award-winning vineyards and wineries is also where you'll find a new and innovative wine label making waves in every possible way. It's not just the name Tongue in Groove or the astonishing branding that's shaking up the local industry. There's another bubble in this winemaker's bottle. These high heels are attached to the legs of winemaker Lynette Hudson. Considered to be one of New Zealand's best winemakers, Lynette has made wines around the world and now brings her considerable experience to Tongue in Groove wines. She's not alone. High heels have a habit of attracting other high heels. This second pair is attached to wine marketer Angela Clifford. Together they are the tongue and groove of Tongue in Groove. We all enjoy a great Riesling and a Pinot Noir, but who's going to be tempted to taste these groovy wines?
Really, we're looking for people who have a knowledge and understanding about wine. Neither the region or the varieties we're making are incredibly mainstream. So we are looking for people who at least know a little bit about wine or enjoy wine, but at the same time are keen to engage in a different conversation, to have a little bit of fun as well.
I think the label also really stimulates anybody who doesn't even know a lot about wine will pick it up and go, wow, that's so different, that's so out there. And that will actually make them want to learn a little bit more about it. So there's potential for new clientele.
Yeah, and the idea is to be engaging and fun and interesting. You know, I think somewhere along the line, perhaps this industry sort of forgot that or was more conservative.
Took itself a bit seriously.
Maybe just a little bit seriously.
Yep, and at the end of the day, life's about having fun, about being passionate and doing the things you love, but never forget every day is just to have a good time. And it's too easy to forget that.
Before we get to the fun part, the grapes must be grown and harvested and wine made. That requires vineyards and wineries. Or does it?
I think the way we've approached it is that to get our label out on the market immediately, because there is that opportunity, especially in Christchurch. There's so much new opportunity available there. We decided to use another winery, use their facilities. They have amazing equipment, so we don't have to make massive capital outlay. And then we've leased awesome vineyards. The thing about living in Waipua for more than 20 years, we know all of the vineyard sites so exceptionally well and what offers the best Pinot Noir and the best Riesling, and so we've approached the growers and working with them in long-term contracts to be able to produce the best possible grapes in every season, and then we can put out the wines, start selling them, and then we're going to progress forward to finding that special spot that we want to plant. But obviously that takes 10 years to get grapes, start making a return, so this way we get to have an income as well, and girls need money to have fun.
It's not just farming and income off a farm that rural women are getting involved with. They're also getting involved with the farming organisations, and Jeanette Maxwell is one. She's given a bit of a shake-up to Federated Farmers.
Jeanette Maxwell's a leader in the rural community. The mother of three was the first woman elected to the Federated Farmers National Board back in 2011.
So I first became involved in Federated Farmers back when ECAN had councillors, and there were some plans that they were proposing that was going to seriously impact our ability to farm here at Rosehill. And a field rep came along and spoke to me about what was happening, and they needed farmer representatives. And I said, well, better get into that. And that's how it started.
Jeanette chairs the Meat and Fibre Division, working alongside 6 other sectors that are all led by men, but that doesn't concern her.
I actually didn't think about it. It didn't worry me. All I knew was that I had a passion. I knew things needed to be done, and I had the energy and a very understanding family who allowed me to take that time to go and to do what I'm doing.
As part of the job, Jeanette is forced to juggle regular trips to Wellington, alongside helping run the family farm and household. And while she stands as a rural leader and role model for women in the industry, it's her children at home who she hopes are learning from her.
I think it's really good for the kids. It shows them that you can have two sorts of life. You can have that life that says you go away and you do the political things and the lobbying and the passionate side of you, but then you can come home and still be the mum and still work on the farm.
As part of her role at Federated Farmers, it's her work as a health and safety spokesperson that has been the most rewarding. Looking back over the past 3 years and her time on the National Board of Federated Farmers, Jeanette wouldn't change a thing.
Oh, I've really enjoyed my time with Feds, and I've been very lucky to have the portfolios that I've had, because having meat and fibre always interesting, because the meat industry and the wool industry are interesting. They are both in points of change right now, so I've been lucky to see that sort of coming to fruition in my time.
But how does she relax and unwind from the day-to-day grind of being one of the key figures in the agriculture industry?
The trick is not to let the spin back past your fingers, because otherwise it starts to tangle up what you're hanging on to.
Well, it's not with a cup of tea in front of the telly like you'd expect.
Yeah, I've been in handcrafts my whole life. It's my way of slowing down, doing something else. I can't just sit still at night, so yeah, always doing something.
Jeanette's spinning Cardiff greasy wool as part of a large project she's working on for her son.
This particular one's going to be worked up for a blanket that my son wants. He wants one in like a teal and Kelly green, so going to take me a while because there's quite a lot of wool that's needed to make a big blanket.
Spinning and weaving isn't her only forte. Jeanette is the master of many crafts.
So besides this, I do needle felting, weaving, sewing, doll making, needlework, like a lot of embroidery, cross stitch, that sort of thing. Occasionally I knit, but I'm getting arthritis in one finger, so it's making it harder to do knitting. But basically, I'll have a crack at any handcraft really.
It's small crafts like these which keep Jeanette's head clear, making it easier to make the hard decisions of her job.
It may be peaceful and serene today, but the tranquility of the garden belies the noise and activity that's gone into creating its stunning vistas and shady dells. And before even the first shelter trees were planted, Penny was working on the overall plan for the garden.
I used to draw pictures and leave them all over the house, and sooner or later John thought it was his idea, so I'd get some help. It was actually quite easy.
There's a whole lot of women now going, that's a good idea, I'm going to have a go at that.
It works.
And seriously, the mix, I mean, you've got all sorts of different trees and in different spots.
Yes, I really love, I think the most important thing for gardens in Canterbury is the change of seasons. I love the change of seasons, and we're very lucky, we're very fortunate to have the change of seasons with the autumn colours and the new growth in the spring. I will never be a completely native person for that reason. I had a mother-in-law who lived in the island of Madeira for 40 years, and she missed the change of seasons enormously because everything was evergreen, and that sadly was where New Zealand natives are. So
the word texture comes to mind.
Yes, very much so. Using different sized leaves and different colours. You know, the strong colours should always be close in, and the paler colours in the distance, because that's how you lengthen a perspective. There's all sorts of tricks to it, Rob.
One of those tricks is where to source plants for the garden.
I will only use nurseries that are south of here, nothing from the north, because plants don't move south, they move only north. And I think people should be aware of where they're buying from, because it's quite a big thing, really. North Island plants don't do well at 1,000 feet above sea level in the South Island.
Penny's determination to source local extends to the many other elements of the gardens. The large wooden sleepers were reclaimed when the Waiau branch railway line was closed in 1978. The stone walls that provide both boundaries and windbreaks around the gardens were built by Penny from the river stones that were cleared and piled around Flaxmere during the Depression. Her clever design, resourceful use of materials and success with planting and nurturing the gardens resulted in Flaxmere being selected as a garden of national significance. So that's our high heels in the high country. Join us again when we highlight more women who are doing amazing things in our amazing country.